Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. More importantly, thanks for allowing me some of your precious time to talk about something I'm actually pretty passionate about, and that's the Protecting Critical Technology Task Force. And if I've done my job in about 20 minutes, you'll be a bit more passionate about it, and as a minimum, have more knowledge and a better understanding of what the threat is, at least as I see it, and how the task force is going to tackle that. And I am not sure how an Air Force guy got selected to be at an Army event like this, but I'm honored. It's pretty great. You know how I knew it was an Army event is because we're an hour behind. Come on, lighten up. That was a joke. That was a joke. No, I'm honored to be here, and any reason to get out of the Pentagon is a good reason, and it's always good to be around people who care so deeply about national security. Now, I understand the theme for today is strategic competition with Russia and China and the implications for U.S. and allied ground forces. Now, trust me, you do not want an Air Force guy talking about ground forces specifically. So I would rather, if I could, talk more broadly on the joint force and the fact that the loss of technology over time has eroded the lethality of the joint force. So if you take away nothing else today, that's what it is. We are in a competition. China and others are stealing our stuff, and it is causing the erosion of the lethality of the joint force. The National Defense Strategy goes to great lengths to talk about this competition, right? It describes great power competition as the central challenge to U.S. prosperity and security. Whether you like it or not, and whether you realize it or not, we are in a daily fight with Russia, China, and others in cyberspace, on our university campuses, and in our businesses. And the prize is military technological advantage, something the U.S. has created over time and frankly, using American taxpayer money. So you probably should care about it for that, if for nothing else, right? This fight is also highlighted when it says in the NDS that it declares that adversaries are licitly and illicitly acquiring U.S. and allied technology to undercut our technological superiority. So it's in the NDS. It must be true. That's the way I see it. And I have some facts I can give you, but they've been doing it for years, and I believe in some cases that they're actually winning. We've unwittingly become the R&D base for our adversary capabilities and for our strategic competitors. They are stealing our critical technology at an alarming rate, putting modernization efforts and our investments at risk, and once again, most importantly, eroding the lethality of the joint force. This isn't to stop stealing because stealing is bad, which it is. This is about what that stealing, in effect, what happens because of that. So this is the fundamental challenge that the task force is tackling. We ask questions like, how do we better defend networks largely unclassified that aren't necessarily our own that we rely on every day? How do we better protect the research that we're funding at our universities, our labs, and our FFRDCs? How do we ensure our strategic competitors don't just buy our technology through foreign investments, mergers, and acquisitions? That is exactly what the task force was stood up for about almost exactly a year ago by Secretary Mattis to get at those very problems. Now, for me, it started in the summer of 2017 when I was on the Joint Staff. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was sitting in a meeting. In this particular meeting, we were talking about PNT, position, navigation, and timing. Someone whispered in my ear, brought me to the back of the room, and they notified me that of a very large exfiltration of data from a defense industrial base network about a program that we care about. And of course, we care about a lot of programs. Even worse than that, this particular exfiltration had happened over a year earlier, and I would tell you that it is very hard to mitigate the risk from the loss of data when you don't find out about it in a timely manner, right? And when you really peel this onion back, it turned out that this was not a unique event. This happened hundreds, if not thousands of times over the past decade. I give this history lesson merely to highlight that we have a problem. Status quo is not working and is clearly not acceptable. And this isn't a new problem. Russia, China, and others have been doing these efforts for years, and this unwanted tech transfer continues to occur at an alarming rate. So once again, I refer to the NDS when it says our advantage will continue to erode without changes to industry culture, investment sources, and security across the national security innovation base. Bottom line is we cannot continue to afford to spend billions of dollars on programs that might be compromised or vulnerable by the time that they're actually fielded. So I'm going to take a breath now. You all buying what I'm selling here? Do you believe me? All right, well, good, because if... Chinese and Russians are watching, too. I know they are. That's exactly why I'm here today. I would once again also highlight this is not just a cyber issue, right? The task force was stood up to prevent the loss from all the vectors of exfiltration, not just cyber, although people tend to always want to focus on cyber. China in particular is employing a comprehensive national strategy to acquire our critical technologies through both licit and illicit methods, and they're actually pretty good about it. First, they're unrelenting in hacking our businesses, both big and small. It's no wonder why their stuff looks remarkably like ours, right? Look at their airlifter and their newest fighter. Looks just like a C-17 and an F-35, right? That's not a coincidence. It would be awesome if they could have an innovative thought of their own, right? Stealing something and being innovative with that stolen data does not, in effect, make you innovative, okay? That's another point I'd like to make. Second, they use our belief in free open markets against us, buying our critical technologies and businesses under pseudonyms and lies. Third, they exploit the openness of our academic institutions and our welcoming approach toward foreign students by sending spies into our universities and by trusting universities into partnerships with Chinese military institutions. And fourth, they exploit our pursuit of global commerce by paying U.S. experts to share their knowledge in China and by requiring American companies to transfer technology in order to do business in China. It's a racket, right? So what are the consequences? Huge economic losses, lost business, lost jobs, undermines the integrity of our research. It's stolen right out from underneath our scientists. And most concerning for our existential survival is it represents, once again, the erosion of our military edge. And I know that everyone throws out the term existential, right? Everything's an existential threat these days. But I would tell you, and I would pause it, and I would ask you to, think about it. If our equipment, our weapon systems, don't work the way that they're intended at a time and place of our choosing, it doesn't seem to get more existential than that to me. You might have a different opinion. Military superiority isn't a birthright. Every generation must build it and sustain it. And make no mistake, China's intent is to cheat its way into becoming the world's sole superpower, and we make it far too easy for them. That's another point. We make it far too easy. We need to now find ourselves in the unenviable position of playing catch-up. We got to stop being the R&D base for them. We got to stop admiring the problem and take action. So that's why the task force was stood up. And because it's such a big problem, and I can't boil the ocean, I really focused the task force on the defense industrial base and in the research and development community. So our mission is to integrate, accelerate, scale, and institutionalize the department's efforts to protect critical technology wherever it resides and by whatever vector it might be exfiltrated. What does that mean? A lot of pockets of excellence in the department doing great things. R&E, A&S, CIO, the services. My job is to integrate those efforts so we're all heading in the right direction. Accelerate. We got to go faster because China is taking the lead. Remember, this is a competition, which means in any competition, there's a winner and a loser. You know which side we want to end up on. So we're going faster. We're scaling it to go bigger. And then most difficult, because I'm going to shutter the place up here in about a year and a half, and we're going to go away. We need to institutionalize this and give it back to the department. What I don't want to have happen is the hard work over 2.5 years, we end up going back to the way things were because people can outweight us, right? Don't want that to have happen. So my job is to get the department moving more quickly, remove roadblocks, advocate for resources, and find those best-in-breed solutions to change culture. And you all know that changing culture is really hard. You've all read the books on organizational culture. Imagine doing it in a building with 25,000 people in it. It's a pretty hard thing to do, and that's what my job is to get people in that building and in throughout the department thinking differently. The direction I've received is pretty clear. Be bold, break glass, don't accept status quo. And I'd say that the overused cliche that doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result applies here bigly, right? So in order to focus the task force, On those two areas I talked about, the defense industrial base and the R&D community, we really nugged it down to 10 specific objectives that I want the task force to get after, and we're going to accomplish before we leave, if we're lucky. Let me just spend a few minutes. I'm not going to go over all 10, but let me go through a couple of these. I would argue that first, in order to protect critical technology, you have to define what you mean by critical. Right? Seems pretty basic. If we protect everything as if it's critical, we protect nothing very well. We currently do have a list that lays out critical programs and technologies, and that's a start, and it's a good thing, and it's required by the 2019 NDAA. But I would say even more important than having a list is ensuring that those technologies are prioritized and tiered, and most important, we mandate protection measures based on the tiering of those technologies. So if you're tracking what I'm saying, if you say that, let's just pick something, artificial intelligence, let's say that that's important to us. If you say that that's a tier 1, the most important thing, I'm going to mandate a lot of things for you to do to protect it, cyber-wise, personnel security, operational security, physical security, and the whole 9 yards. And if you don't want to do that, you're going to have to get a waiver of sorts at a layer commensurate with the tier of that technology. No more is the 04 or 05 program manager going to be making those decisions. We tend to think it's great leadership when you push risk decisions down to the lowest level. In these cases, I don't think you have to have the authority to accept the risk. So we're going to make sure that it resides where that risk acceptance should be. So now that we know what we consider critical, we need to know where that information resides. And as I've talked about, Defense Industrial Base Networks holds a lot of information that the Department of Defense cares about and relies upon. So therefore, we went out and we looked at, what's going on there. We need to put the DFARS clause, the 7012 DFARS clause you've all may have heard about, to ensure that it's in those contracts so that we can hold those companies accountable for their cybersecurity controls. A recent audit validated what we already intuitively knew, which is that most companies don't even have the most basic of cybersecurity controls. Therefore, it's unfortunate we can't rely on a trust-based system anymore. Self-attestation, yeah, I'm good, doesn't work. You had your chance, you blew it. So we're simultaneously developing a cybersecurity maturity model that you may have heard about, CMMC, which companies will be scored against or graded against by a third party, because the department can't scale that. We can't do that on our own, so it'll be a third party. There'll be 1 to 5 levels. CMMC will have 5 levels. And in order to bid on a contract, you will need to have a CMMC score commensurate with that particular contract. So just to give you an idea, CMMC 3 is compliant with all 110 controls of the current NIST standard, which you may know about. Not sure that a lot of companies actually have that right now, but this is a big market and we can't afford the loss. So up your game and get your cybersecurity in order. We're also looking at ways of improving cybersecurity at our smaller companies, and we're doing various pilots because we know that these small companies don't have the robust IT personnel or infrastructure as some others, and we don't want them to go out of business, right? Clearly, so we're working through ways to think about that as well. Beyond cyber security, we're focused also on elevating the importance of overall security in the requirements and the acquisition process. We got to start talking about security way early in the requirements process before it's a program, because it's really hard to bolt on security when it's an acquisition program. I don't believe today that we sufficiently consider security when determining with which companies to do business. In fact, I'm not even sure today that a company's security or lack thereof has any merit of whether or not we do business or we do, that we deal with you at all. So as a result, there's limited financial incentive for companies right now to get more secure. So we're changing that as well. We're going to work through a series of initiatives to elevate the importance of security to ensure that it's as important as cost, schedule, and performance, which any program manager knows out there. That's where the game is, right? If we don't grade people against security, only against cost, schedule, and performance, why would they go out and do the extra credit questions related to security is my point. And I'm not saying that it's going to be level with it and it's something that can be traded. You're either secure or you're not, based on a measure that we determine. So that's kind of, let's switch gears a little bit and get into the R&D side of things. I already told you that we're concerned with academia and the labs and the FFRDCs. We need to prevent individuals with problematic foreign connections from working on DoD-funded research. Does anyone think that that's a mistake? Or you good with that one too? Yeah, so we know that China devotes significant resources at a national level to infiltrate our universities and our labs, and they're doing it for a reason. They've even coined the phrase, picking flowers in China to make honey, or picking flowers in the United States to make honey in China, which I would say perfectly illustrates their deliberate plan to steal R&D, know-how, and technology to advance their military capabilities. That's the other thing. They're not even hiding it. It's out there. You can search it on the internet, and if you're a Mandarin speaker, you can really find it, because when they translate down to English, the story changes somewhat. So it's a well-known problem about what they're doing in our academic environment. The president's talked about it, National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, the Department of Energy. The DoD hasn't done enough, frankly, to get after this threat, and so I'm going to change that as well. Researchers should not be getting paid by DoD and the foreign country at the same time without disclosing that fact, right? You need to disclose it. It doesn't necessarily mean we're not going to allow it, but let someone make a risk decision. You can't just hide it, and we have to ask the question, and currently we don't do that consistently. We can't let our competitors into a lab where a breakthrough advance is discovered only to have them take it back to their country to advance their military capabilities. We must know if you're a member of a foreign talent program. You know, we don't ask the questions, we're never going to know. So we need to change that. We spend billions of dollars a year on our research, right? It's a big market. We not only have a right to know who's doing our research, we have a responsibility to know. The alternative is we wake up one day and find out that the lethality of the joint force is diminished to a point that's irreparable. Switch it up a little bit again. We're also concerned with the illicit ways our strategic competitors get our technology. You know, why steal it when you can just buy the company and get the information outright? This is why we're working to strengthen our ability to stop the unwanted transfer of defense-related technology. We need to do a better job of closing the export control loopholes and getting ahead of these business mergers and acquisitions using CFIUS, FIRMA, and the other authorities that the department has. So that's a lot of information, I know. Most of it was very defensive in nature, but I would say, you know, you can't continue to build your walls high enough and defend your way out of this. You know, a determined adversary is always going to have some level of success, and for far too long, they've stolen our stuff with relative impunity. So we're working through ways to alter that dynamic by defending forward. You may have hunt forward, you may have heard these terms, and implementing active measures to impose costs, disrupt and deny our adversaries, and alter their behavior. Can't talk too much about that side of it, as you might expect. So let me wrap it up. Hopefully you have a better understanding of the complexity of the task force. It's a big problem. We're moving out aggressively, but you know, we can't go at this alone. This is kind of a whole of nation thing, not a whole of government. It's a whole of nation. It's a team sport, and we need every single American to recognize and reveal this behavior for the cheating it is and defend against it. Remember, we don't, just because they're doing it, and there's probably nothing we're going to do, there's no diplomatic way that you can make them stop this behavior, but that doesn't mean that we don't have to doesn't mean we have to continue to make it easy for them, right? So businesses need to wake up, and they need to protect themselves. Invest in cybersecurity and all forms of security. Stop making excuses about not fully understanding your supply chains. Pay as much attention to who your investors are as to who's dating your daughters, right? Think twice before you accept an acquisition bid from a company you don't know, and always consider the national security implications. For universities, you know, how much do you actually know about that Center for Artificial Intelligence that you're about to partner with? Do you vet your applicants who are coming in to do research that the DoD is paying for, or can any swinging Joe off the street come in and do that? And experts of all kinds. I would say, you know, beware of talent recruitment programs. What you may think is a harmless trip to Beijing to share your expertise and experiences may be a lot more nefarious. You know, look at who's inviting you and who's in the crowd. So we are in the midst of great power competition, but in the 21st century, that competition doesn't look like it used to, at least to me. You know, peace versus conflict is a false dichotomy. And as the NDS says, the homeland is no longer a sanctuary, and American society is a target for malicious activity. We're all in this together. So I think that's enough for me. That's probably under target. I think I got us back on calendar, right? So,
Well, thank you. I just want to say, I'm Bill Buck. If you were an Army guy, you wouldn't be flying planes. You'd be jumping out of them.
that's right.
Yeah. All right. So one of the things I'm most concerned about, first of all, that's great. Everything you said, totally agree. Chinese PhD candidates coming in, doing research, filing for patents under their Americanized name, going back to China, filing the same patent in Chinese under their Chinese name. It happens all the time, and it's been going on for years. How do we save the trade? So we have huge trade deficit with China, but we have a very positive, they have a trade deficit with us on semiconductors. How are we doing that in terms of securing our supply chain, and what are we doing when this iPhone, whatever it is, 11, the latest and greatest, was shipped to me from China? I bought it at an Apple store. Those processors were made at TSMC in Taiwan. What are we doing? Why aren't we building our own secure fab?
Yeah, well, you got me nervous when you started talking about trade. I'm not going to go down there, but I would say that supply chain is pretty key to a lot of things I've just talked about. And I will tell you that something that made me nervous from the early days of the task force was having some companies in, and they will remain nameless, and talking about this issue with supply chain. It was, to me, a common man, it makes sense that the prime contractors need to understand fully who their supply chain is throughout their entire supply chain, to which I was told, I don't know that. You know, the privity of contract and all these rules make it impossible for me to know. I think that there's a market there to find out what these supply chain, we're working those. There are different pilots that we're doing to fully understand the supply chain, but I think your point is valid that we need to know what components and pieces and parts and services are going into our weapon systems and phones, or else, yeah, point taken. Yes, sir.
Colin Clark, Breaking Defense. There's a huge push on by all the services to reach out more and more and more to commercial companies, small companies, lots of people who have historically taken the view that security, except to protect their own stuff from competitors, is just a pain in the butt and costs too much money. How are you going to encourage them, aside from punishing them, to come in and do more business with the Pentagon?
Yeah. So I'm from New England. I was raised with the stick, not a lot of carrots. It's the way I was growing up. My dad's was a state trooper in the Mass State Police. I think it worked pretty well. I ended up on the straight and narrow. So I'm a big, I like, you know, next question. No.
They're from California. They don't understand.
I know, therein lies the problem. No. Clearly, there needs to be carrots and sticks. We don't want our own companies to go out of business. I get that. We need to help. But what I would love to have happen is a prime contractor to take these smaller companies in their supply chain under their wing, like the little buddies, and maybe what? Help them with their cybersecurity. Bring them into their own network so that they can take benefit of the prime's cybersecurity. There are multiple ways to do this, and I hear far too many excuses. We're doing a series of pilots, especially for these smaller companies, to help them. You know, there's a statistic out there, and I'm probably gonna mess it up, but of the 110 controls of NIST, you know, a few of them would handle, you know, this X% of all the cybersecurity. There are some that are far more important than others, and I'm not saying that now to get on the record that you don't need all 110. I'm just saying that there are some you should really focus your attention on early and up front.